I paid off over $140,000 worth of student debt in just 3 years, and here's how. Now, before we get into it, I came from a household where both of my parents didn't go to college. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I was deciding which college to go to. I was 17 years old, in high school, knowing nothing about the world. My parents didn't set aside any money for me to go away to school, so I had to take out student loans. I knew nothing about what a good loan was. I didn't know anything about interest rates. I took on 6 figures worth of student debt at a 13% interest rate. And I thought this was normal because we're all taught to go to college and get a job. And I thought this was the normal thing to do. I thought everybody accumulated student debt. And for the most part, it's pretty accurate thought. 54% of students graduate with some form of student debt. And on top of that, tuition prices are rising faster than the entry-level salaries, which is making it extremely difficult for folks to pay off their student debt. There's over 43 million students that have student debt, and the student debt has accumulated to over $1.7 trillion in the US, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now that being said, if you are a recent college graduate, here are my tips on how I paid off $140,000 worth of student debt in just 3 years. Now keep in mind, this is what worked for me. Everybody's gonna have different scenarios and different challenges. This is just what worked for me. So the first thing I would do is keep your expenses low. Now that might seem super obvious, but there are certain ways to go about doing that. Now keeping your expenses low particularly means your rent. Rent takes up a huge portion of your income, which means you could put less money to your student loans. Now if you get a job after college that does require you to go to the office, I recommend living further away from the downtown city, living with roommates. If you can live home with your parents, I highly encourage that as well. The less money you spend per month, the more you can put towards your student loans. For me, in my experience, I was lucky enough to live with my mom for the first few years out of college. We didn't own, we rented a house in the town that I grew up in, and it was definitely nothing special at all. My bedroom was actually the attic, and I took it because it was the biggest room in the house, and I was able to set up my desk, a couch, and my bedroom. It had wood paneling. It was super embarrassing on calls, but it worked for the meantime. Because of that, I was able to keep my expenses extremely low, and the additional money that I was saving on rent was getting put towards my student debt. Now, I know everyone's not in the same position to, rent with their parents, live at home still, but I highly encourage you guys to find opportunities in order to drive that living expense down. Whether that's living with roommates, living further from the downtown, or staying with family. The next piece of advice would be to refinance annually. Refinancing annually was one of the most important and impactful things that I personally have done in order to become debt-free. The initial loan that I took out was $140,000 with a 13% interest rate over 30 years. Now, I'm no mathematician, but plugging in my numbers into a student loan calculator, that would have cost me $417,000 in interest alone. Safe to say that's an intimidating number. So by refinancing, it allowed me to bring my interest rate from 13% down all the way to 4%. And refinancing basically just means that you're taking out a new loan for the current loan that you have. So for example, I took out a loan with Discover at 13%. I refinanced with SoFi, which I highly recommend, and SoFi took over the loan at a lower interest rate. So each year when my income would go up, I would refinance. And in those 3 years, I went from a 13% interest rate to a 7% interest rate to a 6% interest rate down to a 4% interest rate. I personally have used SoFi and I was extremely happy with them. It's not sponsored at all, but they have amazing customer service. They're all based in the US. Their interest rates were really, really competitive at the time for me. And it was one of the biggest reasons why I was able to pay off my student loans so quickly. The next piece of advice would be to create a plan and stick to it. So in order to create a plan for early payoff, most student loans give you a 30-year term, meaning you have 30 years to pay off the term. However, 30 years is way too long for me. I don't want to be paying my loans when I'm in my 50s. So I went to bankrate.com, again, not sponsored, just a really great free resource. They have a student loan calculator. You can start to plug in your loan amount with the term, how quickly you want to pay it off, and you can also play around with additional payments on top of the minimum to see how quickly you can pay off your student loans. So for example, if you're saving $400 per month on rent by living with roommates, you can now put that additional $400 to your student loans. You can now see how many years by putting $400 a month extra per month in actually will help you save in the long run. And that's basically what I did. I played around with Bankrate. I said, hey, I wanted to become debt-free within 5 to 10 years, and I came up with a plan for early payoff. Now that did involve me having to pay additional to my student loans. I think I was paying somewhere around $1,700 per month at the bare minimum, which is equivalent to rent. So I recommend going to bankrate.com and making a plan for early payoff and sticking to it. Last but not least, my last piece of advice to pay off your student debt is to make more money. Now, I know what you're thinking. Duh, that's super obvious. But there are different ways you can actually increase your income in order to put that additional income towards your student debt. So luckily for me, I am in a performance-based role. I'm in sales. And so the money that I make in sales when I do really, really well comes in as additional income for me. I can put additional time and effort into my job and I get rewarded by additional income. Now, I know not everybody is in a performance-based role, so it might be hard to actually increase your income through your job. I recommend doing a few different things. One, asking for a raise. A lot of people are scared to ask for the money, that way they don't get it. Closed mouths don't get fed. Now, if you want to ask for a raise, there's an appropriate way to do it. Don't just hit up your manager and say, hey, I want a raise. Reach out to your manager, let them know that you're interested in a raise in the future, and you're looking for feedback on what they're looking for in order to get that raise. So they might tell you 1, 2, 3 things that are important to them in order to get a raise or a promotion. Take vigorous notes. Whatever they say, write a ton of notes down. Schedule monthly check-ins with your manager and give them updates on your progress towards those things that you wrote down. If they say, hey, we're willing to give a raise to folks that book 5 extra meetings a month or help out in monthly team calls. So what you do is you take notes and you actually do what they say and you document that. So that way you come to the next meeting and you said, hey, you told me I have to take part in more internal calls. I did that right here and here were the results. Then you can then ask for that raise after a few months, after you've completed all the things they've asked for. The other way you can increase some of your income is actually finding a new job, unfortunately. Job hopping, unfortunately, is a good way to boost your income. Now, I don't really subscribe to the idea of job hopping for a few extra $1,000, but if you are getting underpaid, it might be worth checking out additional job opportunities that might be able to increase your income. And last but not least, find additional streams of income. If your job, you're happy with your current job, but you're looking for more streams of income, pick up a side hustle, drive Uber. I'm making content. I am able to make some side income making content. Is it a lot of side income? No. Is it something? Absolutely. And even if it's an additional $100 per month, that $100 can go towards my student debt and allow me to pay it off at a shorter amount and not accumulate that much interest. So those are my 4 tips on how to become debt-free and how I was able to pay off $140,000 worth of student debt in just 3 years. Again, I want to preface by saying I know everyone's situation is different and not everybody has the same access or resources available to pay their own debt down. However, you can't leave your debt up to chance. You can't rely on the government to bail you out and relieve everyone of their student debt. You have to take your future into your own hands. By accumulating debt in the long term, that's only going to hurt you financially. It's going to be hard to take loans out, and it's going to be this big cloud that's just weighing over your head that you just want to pay off. Believe me, I know it can be a crippling feeling to know you have this big cloud of debt over your head. So I'm happy to talk more about this. If you're interested to learn more about how to pay off student debt, feel free to actually just shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to give my recommendations and share what's worked for me. Hopefully this can impact just at least one person to help them become debt-free. And I know it's a little different from the normal content that I make, but this was a big part of my life in my 20s, and I figured that this might help someone as well pay off their debt in some way. So good luck on becoming debt-free.